Across 2 seasons, death has stalked Jericho. Some victims never stood a chance, just in the wrong place at the wrong time. Others were powerful figures cut down in brutal, unforgettable ways. I'm Raphael CG. This is Wednesday Universe. And today, we're counting every single one, every kill, every motive, every twist that proves this story runs deeper than anyone ever imagined. Let's get into it. Before Wednesday Addams ever set foot in Jericho, the town was already bleeding. 3 lives ended in the woods, the kind of deaths that locals whispered about but never dared confront. First was Olivia Davis, a young hiker who vanished along one of Jericho's trails. Search parties combed the forest, but all they found were scraps of fabric and claw marks carved into tree bark. Then came an unnamed woman, taken the same way. No witnesses, no clear cause of death, just the same brutal signature left behind in the shadows. And finally, Benjamin Clark, 78 years old, who walked into the woods armed with a rifle and a can of mace. Whatever he encountered that night, neither bullets nor bravado saved him. His body was torn apart, leaving behind only fragments for the coroner to piece together. The official report blamed a bear, but anyone who looked closely knew better. These weren't accidents, and they weren't random. Something ancient, feral, and patient was already stalking Jericho. 3 deaths, 3 warnings. But Ethan Hansen's death changes everything, not just because it's Wednesday's first glimpse of the Hyde, but because it sets the entire story in motion. The warning comes first. The rideshare driver tells him, "Don't go near the trails by Nevermore Academy."
Thanks.
The locals all know something lurks out there, even if they can't put a name to it. He steps into the Vermont fog, backpack slung over his shoulder, confident like he's walked these woods 100 times. But the forest is wrong. No birds, no insects, just a silence so heavy it feels like the air itself is holding its breath. Tyler's Hyde has been practicing, learning with every kill. By the time it finds Ethan, it's perfected the hunt. The strike is fast, merciless. When Wednesday bolts out of Dr. Kinbot's office, she bumps into a man on the street. The moment her hand touches him, her psychic vision kicks in. She sees his death before it happens. He climbs into his truck like nothing's wrong, but distraction behind the wheel seals his fate. Just as Wednesday foresaw, the crash happens within minutes, leaving him dead on impact. Rowan Laslow believed he was saving Nevermore. Armed with his mother's decades-old prophecy, he was convinced Wednesday Addams would bring destruction to the school. But Rowan made one fatal mistake. He talked too much. During the Harvest Festival, he lures Wednesday into the forest. With a flick of his telekinesis, he slams her against a tree, pinning her helpless as he lays out his so-called mission.
What are you doing?
Saving everyone from you. I have to kill you.
The prophecy shows Wednesday destroying the academy, he insists.
Girl in the picture. That's you.
Patient, calculating, probably already mapping out a dozen ways to escape, but she never gets the chance. From the shadows, the Hyde erupts. Tyler's monstrous form shreds Rowan mid-speech. Telekinesis means nothing against something faster than thought, sharper than steel. He's ripped apart before he can even scream. This moment changes everything. It's the first time we see the Hyde's true face. And the cruel irony that Rowan, in trying to prevent the prophecy, becomes the very reason it unfolds. The boy who tried to outsmart fate becomes its first victim. Fabian lived on the edges of Jericho. A drifter who made the abandoned Pilgrim Meeting House his shelter. While the town carried on, he survived on scraps and whatever he could quietly take. On outreach day, he slips into Uriah's heap. Enid offers him kindness, but Fabian's eye catches something else. A camera. He pockets it, not out of greed, but out of hope. For someone with nothing, even a stolen camera might mean a second chance. The Hyde is waiting. The attack is savage and efficient. And yet, Fabian's death changes everything. The camera he stole keeps shooting through the chaos, capturing the monster in frame. Those images become the proof Jericho can't ignore. It's not a bear stalking their woods. A man who lived invisible dies in a way that forces the town to finally see the truth. Garrett Gates was never part of Nevermore. He was an intruder, carrying the centuries-old hatred of the Crackstone bloodline. In 1990, during the Raven Dance, he stormed the school with one purpose: wipe out every outcast inside. His weapon was a vial of nightshade poison hidden in his coat, meant to contaminate the drinks and turn a celebration into a massacre. But his plan backfired. When he confronted Morticia and Gomez, the vial shattered against his chest. The same poison he intended for dozens of victims coursed through his veins, killing him within minutes. But Laurel Gates never forgot. Garrett's death, and the cover-up that followed, became the fuel for her revenge decades later. The boy who came to kill outcasts with poison ended up choking on his own hate. Dr. Valerie Kinbot genuinely cared for Tyler Galpin. As his therapist, she offered patience and a space where he could talk about his grief, his mother's death, the distance with his father, the weight he carried but never shared. With her, Tyler wasn't just another troubled kid. He was treated like someone worth saving. What Kimbot never realized was that she wasn't treating just a teenager. She was treating a Hyde. To her, Tyler's pain was human, not the mask of something far darker being manipulated from the shadows. When Wednesday barges into her office, Kimbot is caught off guard. Her denials are sincere, her confusion real. She isn't the one controlling the monster or being the monster. She's trapped in the same web. And then Tyler walks out of her locked room. Not the boy she tried to help, but the creature she never imagined him to be. He'd been hiding there all along, hearing every word. The attack is swift, brutal. The one person who tried to reach Tyler's humanity is destroyed by the monster consuming it. Dr. Reggie Anmar made his career among the dead, but his most defining act wasn't in revealing truth. It was in hiding it. 30 years earlier, when Garrett Gates died at Nevermore, Anmar signed off on a false report that buried the case and protected Jericho's powerful. For decades, he carried that lie. Paperwork filed, evidence twisted, the Gates family's grief dismissed as history. In Jericho, where reputation outweighed justice, his silence was just another day's work. But Laurel Gates never forgot, and when she returned, Anmar was near the top of her list. The murder was precise. After hours, in the morgue where he'd spent his life dissecting others, Laurel walked in. The irony was brutal. The man who once disguised murder was about to become a body himself. One clean shot to the head. Then she staged the scene. Cameras disabled. A forged note. Everything arranged to look like guilt finally caught up to him. For a coroner who spent 30 years making murders look like accidents, dying in what looked like a suicide was fitting. The man who buried the truth was buried himself. Cold, efficient, inevitable. Noble Walker wasn't an enemy of the outcasts. Not exactly. He knew Jericho needed Nevermore to survive. The Academy brought money, stability, and a fragile peace. And as sheriff, he worked to keep that balance.
Before the good citizens of Jericho elected me mayor, I used to wear that badge, remember?
But 30 years earlier, he'd helped bury the truth about Garrett Gates' death. Now, as mayor, those things had circled back. When pieces of Laurel Gates' plan began to surface, Walker finally grew a conscience. He called Sheriff Donovan Galpin, arranging a meeting to share what he'd uncovered. For the first time in decades, he was ready to tell the truth. But Laurel was already watching. Her car struck first, slamming into him on the way to that meeting. For most men, that would have been the end. But Walker clung to life. Confined to a hospital bed, Laurel couldn't risk recovery. She slipped into his room, unplugged the machines keeping him alive, and waited. 2 attempts, 1 death. The man who spent a lifetime protecting Jericho's secrets finally tried to expose them. Larissa Weems devoted her life to Nevermore. As a shapeshifter, she knew what it meant to be feared, and shaped the Academy into a refuge for those who had nowhere else to turn. And then, almost by coincidence, Wednesday arrived. Weems was forced to balance the protection of her students with the fragile peace between Outcast and Jericho. She made compromises, kept secrets, sometimes chose stability over truth, but in the end, to expose Thornhill, she transformed into Tyler, a desperate gamble meant to force a confession. For a moment, it worked. Laurel Gates revealed her true identity, her plan to resurrect Joseph Crackstone. But she also struck first. The syringe hit her throat, nightshade burning through her veins. Weems tried to hold the disguise even as her body convulsed, foam rising in her mouth until the life drained from her completely. She didn't die as the strict principal who frustrated Wednesday. She died as the shield that gave her one last chance to save Nevermore.
But she was tough. And she died for the one thing she truly loved, this school.
Joseph Crackstone should have stayed dead. For over 4 centuries, his bones rotted beneath Jericho while his legacy of hatred poisoned the soil above. But Marilyn Thornhill's scheme drags him back, a zealot reborn with unfinished business. What he sees is intolerable. Outcasts walking free, living without chains, daring to exist. To Crackstone, it's proof that his mission was never completed. He storms Nevermore Academy with supernatural strength and centuries of rage, determined to burn it to the ground with every student inside. The duel is brutal and one-sided. Crackstone drives his pilgrim staff through her chest, pinning her to the floor. For a moment, it feels like history will repeat itself. The man who once locked 50 outcasts in a barn is about to claim hundreds more. With Bianca's last-second intervention, the tide turns. One thrust of the blade, straight through his chest. His body reduced to ash, centuries of hatred scattered to the wind. Long before Nevermore Academy, Jericho was already soaked in smoke and blood. Joseph Crackstone gathered 50 outcasts into a barn, chained them to the floor, and set it ablaze. 50 confirmed deaths in a single night, perhaps thousands more across his wider campaign. Among the victims was Goody Adams' mother. Goody escaped through a chimney hatch, but the memory of her mother burning alive defined her path. She tracked Crackstone down, struck him dead, and sealed his soul in a tomb that only her bloodline could open. That fire didn't just kill the outcasts. It left a scar on Jericho's history, one that would resurface centuries later when Crackstone clawed his way back, determined to finish what he started. And then, Season 2 changes the game. Tyler isn't the only predator anymore. Out of a failed experiment 30 years ago rises Isaac Knight, a zombie genius with an endless hunger for brains. Every victim makes him stronger, smarter, closer to human again. But before Isaac's rampage begins, Wednesday faces a reminder that sometimes the deadliest monsters aren't supernatural at all. Season 2 opens with a hunt. Not a Hyde, not a zombie, but a man. For nearly 2 decades, Chad Latroy carved a bloody trail across the Midwest. 14 confirmed victims, each one scalped as his twisted signature. He planned every detail. Routines mapped, escape routes memorized, timing perfected, a human predator hiding in plain sight. But Chad wasn't a mystery to Wednesday. Since childhood, she'd studied his murders like homework, memorizing every report, every crime scene detail. Over the summer, with her psychic abilities sharpening, she finally tracked him down, determined not to become victim 15. Latroy made the mistake of thinking he was the hunter. He shadowed her, tightened the ropes, prepared his strike. But Wednesday was already 3 steps ahead. With Thing assisting, she flipped his own tactics against him and brought him down. Chad Latroy didn't die here, but his spree did. Instead of adding a 15th scalp to his collection, he ended up in handcuffs. 3 decades after his failed experiment killed him, Isaac Knight claws his way back into existence beneath the skull tree. But what rises isn't the bright young inventor remembered at Nevermore. It's a half-rotted corpse with a mechanical heart and one consuming need: human brains. Enter Gabe Packard, a man defined by the ordinary. A driving instructor whose life revolves around parallel parking, 3-point turns, and making sure teenagers remember their blind spots. His biggest fear should have been a fender bender. Instead, fate puts him directly in Isaac's path. The attack is savage. Isaac's skeletal hands crack Gabe's skull open like an eggshell, feasting on the gray matter inside. Every neuron, years of traffic laws, routine habits, mundane human memory becomes fuel for Isaac's resurrection. Ron Kruger lived and breathed structure. As the Phoenix Cadet Master, he drilled young normies with military precision, hammering home the belief that discipline, order, and hierarchy could overcome any obstacle. To Ron, the world was simple: leaders and followers, winners and losers, normies and outcasts. So when his cadets lose to Nevermore in the annual competition, Ron can't accept it. That night, he leads a reckless raid on the outcast camp, determined to prove his superiority once and for all. But instead of finding sleeping students, Ron stumbles into the wrong tent. Waiting inside isn't a teenage outcast but Isaac Knight, freshly reborn and starving. There's no training manual for this, no chain of command to fall back on. Just a walking corpse with a mechanical heart and a hunger that drills and discipline can't prepare him for. The attack is brutal. Isaac's grip crushes bone. The cadet master who preached that preparation conquers all learns a final brutal lesson. Some enemies don't follow the rules. During the chaos at Willow Hill, Laurel Gates is being escorted down a corridor by 2 local guards. But Isaac Knight is already loose inside the facility. He strikes fast. The first guard goes down instantly, skull shattered, brain consumed before the second even realizes what's happening. Laurel takes the chance to run, while Isaac tears through the second guard with the same brutality. 2 men sworn to keep order become just another step in Isaac's growing evolution. Dr. Rachel Fairburn embodied the best of normie medicine. She dedicated her career to treating outcast patients at Willow Hill Hospital. As chief psychiatrist, she understood the unique struggles of those living with supernatural abilities. Her expertise made her invaluable to Willow Hill's mission, and a perfect target for Isaac Knight's resurrection. When chaos erupts at Willow Hill during Wednesday and Fester's infiltration, Fairburn does what she's always done: protect her patients. She keeps calm while alarms blare, guiding staff and trying to maintain order as shadows move in the halls. Her composure is unshakable until Isaac finds her. There's no protocol for this, no treatment plan, no way to reason with a corpse driven by hunger. Isaac's attack is swift and merciless. With chilling precision, he cracks her skull like a surgeon opening a cranium. And with each bite, Isaac changes. Augustus Stonehurst began as a pioneer, the first normie hired to teach science at Nevermore Academy. For a time, he was admired for bridging 2 worlds, but admiration curdled into obsession. He didn't just want to study outcast powers, he wanted to own them. As chief physician at Willow Hill Psychiatric Hospital, Stonehurst finally found his perfect laboratory. The LOIS program, Long-Term Outcast Integration Study, became his life's work. Decades of twisted experiments, all in pursuit of one goal: strip powers from outcasts and graft them onto normies like himself. His greatest success was transforming his own daughter Judy into an avian predator. His greatest failure came when he tried the same process on himself, leaving his mind fractured and his body broken. A doctor turned into his own patient. But Stonehurst's most fateful act happened years earlier at Nevermore. When Isaac later perished in a lab explosion, Stonehurst moved on. What he never anticipated was that the mechanical heart would one day restart, pulling Isaac back from death itself. When they finally meet again in the halls of Willow Hill, the reunion is chilling. Isaac doesn't scream, he doesn't rage. He just leans close and whispers, Jesse Quinn was a fixer, a man sent by Judy Stonehurst to track down escaped Lois patients and erase them quietly. For him, it was just another job: find the outcasts, tie up the loose ends, collect the payment. But Jericho's sewers hid something far worse than runaway patients. Tyler Galpin, no longer bound to a master, had been spiraling into madness. His Hyde form prowled those tunnels, lashing out at anything that moved. When Quinn stumbled into his domain, the attack was savage. Bones shattered, flesh torn, blood left pooling in the dark. For a moment, it seemed survival was possible, but Jericho doesn't let survivors walk free. Isaac Knight found him later, and Isaac doesn't care about wounds, struggle, or desperation. And some deaths scream for attention. Others whisper from the shadows. This one, we never see. Carl Bradbury had spent years chasing shadows for a paycheck. But deep down, the former cop still had the instincts of an investigator who couldn't let corruption slide. When his old partner, Sheriff Donovan Galpin, reached out about strange inconsistencies at Willow Hill Psychiatric Hospital, Carl finally felt alive again. Something wasn't right. Death certificates that didn't match cremation records. Patients who supposedly died but were still being billed. Doctors with a history of cover-up stretching back decades. Piece by piece, Carl began pulling on the thread of a conspiracy that could unravel Jericho itself. And then he pulled too hard. During what should have been a simple surveillance job, Carl got too close to the truth about the Project Lois program. Close enough that Judy Stonehurst decided to act. The attack came without warning. A murder of crows erupted from the trees, slamming into his van like living shrapnel. Windows shattered. Black wings filled every inch of the vehicle. Beaks and talons tore at his face and eyes with surgical precision. Carl fought, but there's no handbook for surviving a storm of living blades. By the time the attack ended, silence was all that remained. Another investigator silenced, another truth buried. Carl Bradbury's death isn't just another statistic in Jericho's growing body count. It's the moment Season 2 makes clear. The Stonehursts aren't just experimenting on outcasts, they're killing anyone who threatens to expose them. The cop who spent his life searching for answers became the victim of the one answer Jericho could never allow. For most of his life, Donovan Galpin was the kind of cop who treated outcasts like problems to be managed, not people to be protected. In Season 1, his suspicion of Nevermore and his open hostility toward Wednesday made him feel less like a sheriff and more like an obstacle. But the revelation that his own son was the Hyde shattered that worldview. Stripped of his badge, shunned by the town, Donovan was left with a truth he could no longer ignore. His neglect, his blind prejudice, had helped turn Tyler into a monster. This time, instead of denial, he chose redemption. Partnering with his old friend Carl Bradbury, Donovan threw himself into investigating Willow Hill Psychiatric Hospital. The deeper they dug, the clearer the picture became. Decades of falsified records, experiments on outcasts, and deaths disguised as paperwork. For the first time in years, Donovan wasn't just chasing criminals. He was fighting for something bigger than himself. But redemption always has a price. Judy Stonehurst couldn't let him live long enough to expose her family's secrets. The attack was swift, calculated, and cruelly poetic. A swarm of trained crows descended on Donovan with military precision, tearing out his eyes. The very organs that had once refused to see the truth. He collapsed in the dirt, blind and broken, left as a warning for anyone else who dared to question Willow Hill. For most of Season 2, Judy Stonehurst hid in plain sight. The cheerful assistant in bright sweaters, always smiling, always helpful, always underestimated. To the outside world, she was harmless. To Willow Hill, she was its beating heart of horror. She wasn't just Augustus Stonehurst's daughter, she was his masterpiece. Years of twisted experimentation turned a normie child into an avian with razor-sharp control over crows. What should have been a father's love became something far darker, a legacy of stolen abilities and weaponized cruelty. Behind that friendly facade, Judy orchestrated murders with surgical precision. Sheriff Donovan Galpin, Carl Bradbury, patients who got too close to the truth. Her flock of crows became assassins in the night, silencing anyone who threatened the Project Lois program. All the while, she maintained her mask. Bubbly assistant by day, executioner by night. But Isaac Knight was never part of her plan. And when she turned her sights on the escaped Lois patients, especially his sister Francoise, she crossed a line even her father wouldn't have dared. The showdown happens off-screen, but the aftermath says it all. Isaac deals with her the same way he dealt with every obstacle. Methodical, efficient, merciless. Judy's body is found crammed into the trunk of her own Toyota Prius, a grotesque parody of suburban normalcy, and a humiliating end for someone who lived her life behind masks. Gideon Sterling was never really Gideon Sterling. Once upon a time, he was just Arnold Hunt, a failed actor who reinvented himself as the charismatic face of the morning song cult. But even that was just another performance. The real director behind the curtain was Barry Dort, who pulled the strings and promised Gideon recognition in exchange for obedience. When the FBI dismantled Morning Song thanks to Bianca's testimony, Gideon should have vanished like every other washed-up scam artist. Instead, desperation pulled him back to Jericho. He came crawling to Barry, convinced there was still a role for him in the sequel, but Barry had already rewritten the script. He didn't need a frontman anymore. He didn't need dead weight. The confrontation is short, brutal, and merciless. Gideon, the man who once stood on a stage commanding crowds with his voice, can only scream as fire engulfs him. For years, Barry Dort thought he was the true mastermind. the puppeteer pulling strings from the shadows. With Morning Song, he used Gideon Sterling like a mask, the smiling face hiding Barry's greed, cruelty, and hunger for control. But Jericho has a way of tearing masks apart. By season 2, Barry wasn't just a scam leader. He was Nevermore's principal, wielding his pyrokinetic powers like a boss. To him, fire meant control, fear, spectacle. At the Masquerade Gala, that illusion finally crumbled. Wednesday and her allies exposed him, ripping away the protective coral pendant that shielded him from Bianca's siren song. For the first time, Barry was defenseless. Cornered, desperate, he made one last power play. Grabbing Bianca, he threatened to burn her alive, flames dancing in his hands. But in his panic, Barry didn't notice the chandelier above him already catching fire. That's when Ajax struck. One deadly glance, and Barry's body turned to stone. Frozen mid-rage, mid-threat, mid-delusion of power. Seconds later, the burning chandelier came crashing down, shattering his petrified body into rubble and embers. Barry Dort's death was as theatrical as his life. Professor Orloff was Nevermore through and through. Eccentric, brilliant, and dedicated to his students. Played by Christopher Lloyd, he embodied the Academy's legacy of knowledge passed from one generation of outcasts to the next. But legacies don't always end the way they should. When Isaac Knight returned from the grave, Orloff recognized him instantly. This wasn't just another monster loose in Jericho. It was his student, once full of potential, now twisted into something unrecognizable. For a fleeting moment, there's almost recognition, maybe even sorrow. But Isaac had no room left for nostalgia. The attack was clinical, brutal, inevitable. Isaac cracked open his old teacher's skull the way one might open a specimen jar, consuming decades of hard-earned knowledge, bite by bite. It's the cruelest kind of irony. The mentor who once nurtured a brilliant young mind becomes fuel for the monster that mind became. And Isaac's collection is almost complete. The veterinarian becomes his final target, a quick clinical kill in the quiet hours of an empty clinic. Brain consumed, regenerate himself. With this last feast, Isaac completes his transformation from mindless zombie to fully resurrected genius. Sometimes the quickest deaths serve the greatest purpose. Françoise Galpin's story is tragedy layered upon tragedy. For years, she was believed dead, mourned by her husband and son, when in truth she was imprisoned in Willow Hill's secret Project Lois facility, subjected to decades of brutal experiments. Her escape during the chaos of the uprising should have been her triumph. A mother returned, a family restored. Instead, it became something far darker. The experiments had left Françoise broken. Her Hyde abilities were consuming what little humanity she had left, turning survival itself into a slow death sentence. Isaac, her brother, offered salvation through his machine, an extraction that could separate Hyde from host. But the process demanded a sacrifice: Tyler's blood. Her survival would mean her son's death. The rooftop confrontation at Nevermore turns into a family tragedy. Mother and son clash in their monstrous forms, each driven by love, fear, and desperation. Tyler refuses to give himself up, clinging to the Hyde within him as his true self. For Françoise, the realization is unbearable. Her son chooses the monster over the man. Dangling from the rooftop edge, Tyler's hand outstretched to save her, Françoise makes her final choice. She lets go, not because she slips, but because she cannot live in a world where her son embraces the very curse that destroyed them. The woman who endured years of torture falls not to the cruelty of her captors, but to the despair of a mother who couldn't save her child from himself. Marilyn Thornhill built her entire existence around a lie. For years, she played the role of Nevermore's gentle botany teacher, nurturing plants while secretly nurturing something far more dangerous: Tyler Galpin's transformation into a Hyde. Behind the glasses and cheerful facade was Laurel Gates, the last surviving member of a family dedicated to outcast genocide. But Season 2 strips away all pretense. Imprisoned inside Willow Hill, Thornhill faces the fallout of her Season 1 machinations. When chaos erupts during the breakout, she seizes the chance to reclaim control over Tyler, convinced she can once again make him her obedient weapon. Her fatal mistake is underestimating how much Tyler has changed. In Season 1, she manipulated his trauma and abandonment, bending his pain into a blade pointed at Nevermore. She believed that bond was unbreakable, that he would always need her. But months of captivity have twisted Tyler into something darker, a Hyde with no loyalty left. When Thornhill approaches him with the arrogance of a puppet master, expecting obedience, she finds only rage. The attack is swift and merciless. Tyler's claws shred the woman who once held his leash, ripping apart the last tie to his life as a manipulated pawn. There's no hesitation, no recognition, just the pure violence of a monster claiming freedom. Isaac Knight's final death is one of the most poetic moments in Wednesday's mythology. After devouring brains and evolving from a shambling corpse into a dangerous genius, he truly believes he's reclaimed control of his destiny. His plan to save his sister Françoise hinges on one missing piece: his severed right hand. For decades, that hand lived on as Thing, beloved by the Addams family. When Isaac reattaches it, he assumes blood ties and shared history will override any loyalty Thing might have formed elsewhere. But Thing is no longer just Isaac's appendage. Years of love, loyalty, and acceptance have made him something Isaac never expected: his own being, capable of making his own choice. Sting faces the ultimate decision, and in that decisive moment, he chooses the family that embraced him over the body he once belonged to. The strike is precise and devastating. Sting plunges into Isaac's chest and rips out the mechanical heart that sustained him for 30 years. Without it, Isaac's second life ends as abruptly as his first. So, here's final kill count rankings. Number 1, Joseph Crackstone, more than 50 confirmed, potentially thousands, the genocidal heavyweight. His massacre of the outcasts in the 1600s still stands as the single largest pile of bodies in Jericho's history. Number 2, Chad Latroy, the Kansas City Scalper. 14 confirmed kills, a flesh and blood monster. Latroy butchered 14 victims before Wednesday tracked him down and ended his spree in the Season 2 opener. Number 3, Isaac Knight, the zombie slurp. 12 confirmed human kills, the most methodical killer. Every brain had a purpose, to rebuild himself, grow smarter, and exact revenge on his creators. Number 4, Augustus Stonehurst, 10 kills, Project Lois experiments, the hidden architect of Season 2. Decades of cruel experimentation on outcasts made him responsible for an invisible but devastating death toll. Number 5, Tyler Galpin, the Hyde. 8 confirmed human kills from coffee shop barista to feral predator. Number 6, Judy Stonehurst. 4 confirmed kills. A smile masking ruthless intent. With stolen avian powers, she orchestrated the murders of Sheriff Donovan Galpin, Carl Bradbury, and multiple patients, until Isaac put an end to her. Number 7, Marilyn Thornhill, aka Laurel Gates. 3 confirmed kills, Season 1's manipulator. She pulled Tyler's strings and eliminated Jericho's leaders, until her own creation ripped her apart. So tell me, which death hit you the hardest? Drop it in the comments, but don't go anywhere. The story doesn't stop here. Click the video on your screen right now, and I'll see you there in just a few seconds.